Hello, hello. So, I'm going to be doing this short guide in pieces of the Bloody Palace. For those who don't know, the Bloody Palace is by far the best part of the Devil May Cry series, in my opinion. And it's 101 levels of combat that you just go through one at a time. Every 20 levels, there's a boss, and then there's the final boss. For those who have played through Devil May Cry, it's I don't know how else to put it, but it's like the arcade mode as opposed to the story mode. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get better at the characters you want to get better at. So I figured what I'd do is start off by showing the first 20 levels with Nero, which is the standard character. And Nero in Devil May Cry 5 seems to have a lot of the same moveset. So a lot of practicing this is actually kind of relevant. So I'm just going to go into it right away. I don't have anything that turns the timer off, and I don't think the timer's that bad of an issue, honestly. A lot of people have problems with the timer, and I don't think they should. I'm just going to take these three guys out, and I'll go a little into Nero before we go into the enemies themselves. Alright. So when you're I'm kind of aiming this guide as people who can look up the moves or are aware of the moves and kind of know the character to a certain extent, but are looking to improve. So the quick things I'm going to mention about Nero is that you need to get to know the Exceed system, which is how he revs up his sword. If you want to be good with Nero, that's where you start. Everything else is superfluous. Like, it's great to be able to do all his moves without a problem, know them, know which ones to use at the right time. But if you can't exceed consistently, there's not a lot you can do. And as you can see, I am not perfect with it. I'm still learning, and honestly, just like everyone else, when it's freak-out time, I do kind of forget sometimes until muscle memory kicks in. So the trick with Exceed is that you can either rev it, which takes forever and you will do sometimes, or you use the rev button right as Nero hits with an attack. And that'll instantly get you a bar, or if you do it perfectly, it'll get you 3 bars, which I won't be able to demonstrate on demand because that would be too lucky. So with Exceed, there we go. With Exceed, a lot of his attacks get super powered. They cover more distance, like that. And they let Nero do some cool stuff. Certain attacks that are single hits become multi-hit, which is important. Which on that note, just in case people are just trying to learn this, any multi-hit attack with Nero, you hit Exceed on the second hit, not the first one. So if you're doing this, if you press the button on the first of these 2 hits, those ones, you're not going to get it. You want to hit it on the end of the second one. Now, of course, I'm going to try to struggle to do it because, oh well. So mastering that is like the first step. Trying to think of anything that like people don't know about Exceed. I think the only thing that some people don't mention is when you use Exceed attacks in the air, Nero falls faster. It's hard to demonstrate, but when you're trying to like combo roulette spins, it's noticeable. So I don't know when that comes up, but it's just something to be aware, is that the challenge of mastering Exceed goes up in the air. The only other thing I think is if you're doing Streak, which is Nero's stinger attack, or forward dash attack, and you have Exceed, you can hold it down. Use that time to rev, or just wait for enemy placement. Other things to know about Nero real quick. Get used to holding down that charge button and never letting go. If you're using a gamepad, I recommend switching to like the shoulder buttons for his gun. If you're crazy like me and use a keyboard, I have it bound to the K key with J and L being sword and buster respectively. So I just hold that button down all the time and I never let go unless I use it. At the same time, get used to using his first level charge um, because that is honestly much better than shooting in almost every scenario. I think that's it. Learning to use his devil trigger moves and stuff is important too, but once again, I'm expecting you, I hope it's not too much, to kind of know the moves and know how to be able to do them. And so we can go over the first 20 levels, no problems, talk about kind of the enemies. And the Bloody Palace really goes up in difficulty. The first 20 are the easiest without a doubt, up until Burial. The first boss really ratchets it up for new players. But there's no healing items, there's no items in general, so it's really an endurance run. There's the timer, but honestly, as Nero, you're not going to be worrying about it. So let's just keep going. So the first few levels are really introducing the scarecrows, which are the most basic enemies in the game. At this point, if you're struggling with this, you gotta learn some new techniques, I guess, because they're not too bad. The thing about these leg scarecrows is that they can really jump from a distance at you, so you just need to be aware from where they are at all times. Another thing that's important about the Bloody Palace, and honestly really important about the first 20 levels, is the timer. I don't worry about the timer with Nero. I definitely worry about it with some other characters. And it is a matter of skill getting past and not thinking about the timer. But the best way to look at it is good gameplay rewards more time. And by that I mean is, so you get a static bonus finishing each level. And then you get another bonus if you do it without getting hit. So those things are simple. The really important note is the first 20 levels, the bonus is bigger for both of those. So you want to do the first 20 levels without taking a hit if you want to maximize on time. Especially if it's a character you're not good with, let's say your Dante or Trish isn't great, definitely you got to master these first 20 to go without a hitch. If you're worrying about the timer. At a certain point, you won't worry about the timer and life will be grand. The other thing to note is the higher stylish rank, or style rank you have when you take down enemies, the more time they give you. And the variance is pretty big. I think some enemies go from like a few seconds to like 10 to 14 seconds, which is insane. So sometimes burning through enemies as fast as you can isn't the right answer. Instead, when you can kind of lower all of their life, get a high style rank, and take them all out. Which the first few levels are great for that. Honestly, the Bloody Palace is a long, long adventure. And if you're going to play through it, you might as well take your time and enjoy yourself. And using your taunts, using your time, it's the best way to get the highest rank. And it's the best way to maximize the timer. Get yourself the Smoking Stick style, get some taunts in, make sure your devil trigger's at the right level. A small addition they made from the regular Devil May Cry 4 to Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, which was amazing, is that your charge shot kind of persists. It used to be that every time you went through a level, you had to switch. I'm sorry, I'm getting hit because I realized I should talk about these guys. These are the Frosts. These are the first enemies that honestly are going to give you some trouble in all of Bloody Palace. And all of the game, if you have it. Right now, they go down pretty easy, but the important things to note about them is that they'll heal. I'm going to see if I can get him to... Nope, just attack me. You'll note... There... No. So you'll notice sometimes they'll go into this giant ice formation. There we go. And you'll have to break through it. As long as you don't, they're healing in there, which can cause, especially new players, more trouble. The things to note about the Frosts is you want them in the air. You want them in the air, and you want to bust through them. That's where they're the weakest. They're excellent at long range, and you should not allow them to kind of stay at long range. Here's another DMC 4 fun fact. I don't know how many we're going to have. In this game, if your enemies aren't on screen visually, they will not often attack you. Some of them will, rarely, but most of the time they won't attack you. They'll just kind of like slowly strut up back to screen, and then they'll start attacking you. So by arranging which enemies you can see and which enemies you can't see, you can kind of control who's attacking. Alright, further on. I think these are the Angelo armors. Yes. So these guys are punching bags for Nero by themselves. They have a shield, which they don't use properly, and you just knock them in the air and buster them. And that's it. That's it. They're good. They're very susceptible to the blue rose charge attacks. And they let you do a lot of stuff without worrying. Early on, you just want to combo them, knock them in the air, don't even worry. These are the first few levels. These guys aren't going to give you too much trouble. Alright, so I think these are the Fausts. You want to use combinations of Snatch, which is the grab, and Buster, which is like this one, to take their cloak off. The charge shots are also really good because they do a lot of damage. Yeah, easy peasy. These guys are also very easy for Nero. Devil Trigger, Fire. Devil Trigger, Buster. Devil Trigger, Buster, Gun. That's it. And just rinse and repeat. Even further on, these guys go down easy. The main thing that's really good about them is they drop white orbs, which refill your Devil Trigger. So you can just indefinitely be in Devil Trigger. Alright, these things, these seed sapperling things. I don't know what they're called, to be honest. They're kind of put into the Bloody Palace for two things. One, they always give you health. So later in the Bloody Palace, they're used as kind of like a reward. Because there's no health drops, but they will give you these guys just to take them out and gain a little health. And this is especially easy for Nero, because as you can see, Nero's Buster one-shots them. Every time. It doesn't matter the difficulty. Every time, rip apart. The only time that doesn't happen, I think, is if they're in Devil Trigger late into the Bloody Palace. But I think you just have to hit them a few times and it works. The other thing these guys provide is kind of like, I don't know if I'd call them mines or traps, but they attach to these lesser enemies, excuse me, and just make them stronger, honestly. Early on, they're not too much of a threat. Nero's Blue Rose is a cannon, and you just need to charge up, stay away, knock them, like. With the red charge, not only do you knock them down and turn off the blade effects of the Sapperling, you kind of render them to half health. And by the time you catch up and combo them just a little bit, that should be it. So you shouldn't worry too much about them. Alright, so this is about the halfway points of the first part of Bloody Palace. And this is the first time you kind of have a crowd. And this is also the time I'm actually going to talk about these guys. These guys are kind of seen as the joke of Devil May Cry 4 because they're not particularly interesting. Like, Devil May Cry 3 had the sins and everything as the punching bag. And they're light, they get knocked around a lot, and they look dumb, I'm not gonna lie. So, the thing is about them is if you don't take these guys seriously, this is where you're gonna take a lot of free hits or like lose a lot of health for no reason. If you've ever been in school and the teacher tells you that, like, you know, you're really smart but you suck at the details, these guys are the details. Their attack pattern is erratic, it's chaotic, but it's constant. These are some of the most aggressive enemies in the game, and you cannot take them lightly. As you can notice, they're always approaching you, and their attack pattern comes out of nowhere. They're also, for some reason, incredibly hard to royal block or dodge properly. They're just weird like that. So if you can get them alone, there's no threat. But when they're in a group, they are dangerous. Nero, the good thing is that Nero is 100% equipped to deal with them. Exceeded streaks, these ones, will literally make mincemeat of them. Just charge up, fly in, and rip them apart. Also, that charge shot will also knock them out, because they tend to group up, so just take advantage of that. Alright, so in the second half, who are we dealing with? Oh, these guys. So these lizard things are the worst and the best at the same time. They're not that difficult to combo, as you can see. They're very prone to... They've got a shield, but once it's broken, you can knock them down like that, grab them, launch them, and honestly, just alternate. Alternate knocking them down, grabbing them, and whatever you do, don't buster them, unless they're the last enemy. If you buster them, Nero does this really long slam them around by the tail attack, in which you are vulnerable in a lot of general areas that enemies will attack you, and it's just going to open you up. So for the first 20 here... Ooh, okay, we're going to talk about these guys in a second. For the first 20 here, I'm more talking about the enemies themselves, just because the chances, like, there's not a lot of specific arrangements of enemies in the Bloody Palace you need to worry about right now. But then there's these guys. So these are the highest level scarecrows, and they're scary visually, but they're a joke otherwise. As you can see, you can just pull them, and they just stay down forever. You have no rush, they're slow to attack, they're slow to do anything. They take a lot of hits, sure, but honestly, you don't need to worry about that, because anytime you get worried, you just knock them away. And just work on the other one. This one's getting back up, just switch. No problem. So when they die, they do have that attack where the axe blade flies out and lands where they died, but that's not too bad. If you're going to buster these guys, do it in the air. They're very susceptible, it knocks them far away, follow with the gun, and you're good. Oh, not quite. Okay. Those guys are kind of, what makes those big scarecrows frustrating, I think they're called mega scarecrows, is when they are far away. When they are far away from you, they have like range attacks and they have dash attacks in which they're vulnerable. Invulnerable. That is like the only time you need to be concerned. Otherwise, you're pretty much set. So who's up after this? Okay, so this is a like first mixed battle. Fun things to note, for some reason, these two enemy types will attack each other. He doesn't do enough damage. Don't bet on it. Don't worry about it. Just... the main tactic you're going to use in most fights in the Bloody Palace, or in Devil May Cry in general, is you're going to want to kind of make your enemies alone. Kind of like separate enemies from each other, either by launching them in the air or pushing them to one end of the arena. And then combo them a little bit, and if his friends come up, you just kind of book it for a little bit. Certain characters have really good AoE attacks that deal with huge clusters of enemies. Dante has Yamato, I guess Virgil also has Yamato, and Nero has Streak, and the back attack, this one, on his double trigger. These ones are really good, but they tend to either make you vulnerable or they kind of have a charge in. So you can use these honestly like to take out enemies in huge swoops, but you're still going to have to set them up. A lot of Devil May Cry is setting up your enemies and knowing them. I'm just going to pause for a second. Speaking of setting up, so this is one of those enemies that a lot of new players have difficulty with, and I'm going to show you as Nero. I think every single character has like an easy way to deal with them, but as Nero, your solution is this. Hit him with a charge, get that cloak off as soon as possible. As soon as he comes, double trigger, use your forward attack, oh, and miss completely. That is embarrassing. And I don't have double trigger. Alright, well, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're going to taunt a little, get our double trigger back. I'll try to do it again. Come on down. The way this guy works is if you try to fight him on his terms when he's cloaked, he has a lot of mean attacks, he does a lot of nasty stuff, but if you knock him down and use this attack, he dies every time. Every time. It doesn't matter what difficulty you're in. It doesn't matter who else is around unless they knock you out of it. He's going down. So here, I kind of accidentally stepped in the portal on recovery. So we're just going to go straight in the next one. Here are the... I think these are the Bianco Angelos, sorry. These guys are really one of the more annoying enemies in the game. When they're around, these other armors just get stronger. And actually, I shouldn't say stronger. They get smarter. They get used to using battle tactics, and like the main one can arrange them into new positions. It just makes them annoying. Generally, you want to take out the little ones first, because every time... I feel like the rule for most games is these enemies do the same damage no matter how much health they have. So you want to focus on them one at a time. And each time you take one out, that's one less enemy to deal with. This guy by himself is frustrating, but not the worst. Much like the lizard dude, you do not want to fight this guy on the ground. If you can, put him in the air, buster him as many times as you can. But on the ground, Buddy blocks a lot, and Buddy's not your friend. Who are we going into next? I think it's all the scarecrows, I could be wrong. Yes, it's all the scarecrows. So this is kind of the example of the mega scarecrow. This isn't like too bad, because it's just the little scarecrows, but just taking hits for nothing there. This is the situation where you want to just kind of keep this guy somewhere. Like, either off-screen or just perma-stunned. Deal with his friends. And whenever he's up and moving like that, either take some time to combo him, or just knock him back. And once he's back, deal with his friends again. As you can see, this is one of his ranged attacks. If you're not paying attention, that's going to hit you. But as long as you kind of are worrying about... That's like the case in point of scarecrows. These enemies are useless if you pay attention to them. If you can't, they're going to hit you every time. And the scarecrows are all meant to divide your attention between them. So just kind of assess the big ones, keep them at a distance, keep them knocked down, and the little ones, separate them, combo them. In the air, most of them are worthless. Speaking of in the air, can you believe how effective that is? That works most of the time. If their devil trigger doesn't work on the higher difficulties, it won't work every time, because they won't always take it. But I think if you're in devil trigger, it should work every time, even if they are on a higher thing. But I could be wrong about that. Once their shield is down... Wow, that was a good flash. Once their shield is down, they're pretty much asking to be comboed. So just do that. Once they shield, don't just kind of attack into them. That's exactly what they want, and they're going to follow up with a counterattack. Like that. So, and they have the same revving. You can use the revving to kind of figure out what they're going to do. And their sword attacks are pretty easy to dodge, to be honest. But I don't think it's too bad once they're alone, much like all the other enemies. But if you can get them in the air, you can buster them, and if you can buster them, they're dead. Alright, who are we going into now? After the two, I'm pretty sure it's the Blitz. Let's see. Alright. Yeah. So I'm just pausing because this is going to go quickly. The Blitz is definitely one of the enemies that newer players freak out with, because it's a giant lightning demon that's invulnerable half the time, and if you don't kill it fast enough, it goes into rage mode. Much like the Mephisto, or I honestly don't remember its name, this thing has... Every character has a way to take care of it easily, and I'll show you for Nero. And this time I'll show it properly. So hit him with a charge shot, wait for that shield to go up, devil trigger, buster them, jump. Oh. So of course I'll mess it up again, but the idea is you jump in the air like that, buster them, hit them with the gun, buster them. And I didn't really need that last one, but you can do it 4 times. If you mess up, I think you can only do it 3. And then he'll start this phase with next to no life. And then just use your gun to take him out. If you take him out like this, he'll always give you triple S rank, which means as long as you don't mess up, you'll always get the max time for this. Of course, the inverse is true, because if you let him go into his final mode and he has like half health still, there is no way you're reasonably going to be able to kill him, and he's just gonna drain your timer the whole time and give you a pretty bad reward. It's frustrating, I'll admit, that this demon can only be taken out cleanly in 1 or 2 ways for each character, but that's just the game. You just gotta accept that's the game and move on. I think Nero's is the easiest. Dante and Virgil, once you get the timing right, is not so bad. Trish, I'm not 100% sure how to do it with Trish, but I think it's not that bad. And Lady is kind of a cakewalk if he behaves. If you can charge your attacks and he doesn't want to run around, you're going to have a great time. If he's running around, not so much. And obviously, just in the same ways as the Bloody Palace works, later he's going to be running around. So this is the second last level of the first 20. And you know Capcom loves their zombie dogs. These guys, just buster them. Don't even worry. Buster them, launch them on their friends. Don't even worry. Later, they're going to be really hard to grab, and attacks like Streak are really good at taking them out. So honestly, that's the end of the 1 to 20 guide for Nero. I think a lot of these things are elementary because it's the first 20, and I know the combat goes really fast as I'm using a lot of Exceed, and honestly the enemies aren't that difficult at this time, but like I think some of the things, it's a great place to kind of practice the first like the mechanics of the enemies don't change that much. They become tougher, they deal more damage, and they're harder to snatch or buster, but like this, their attack patterns stay the same, and what to do with them stays the same mostly. So even here, even learning from these isn't too bad. So here we are. So every 20, you go up against Burial, a boss. This time it's Burial. You don't always go up against Burial. But every 20 levels, you go up against the boss. The first one is Burial, and for new players, honestly, he can be really challenging. Especially if you honestly don't know how to dodge his attacks and stuff. If you want to practice Burial and you don't want to work to 20, I would go on Sons of Sparta mode to mission 19. You still got to go through that first area, but after that, after the first like part of the puzzle level, you'll fight Burial, and that's kind of the best place to get some practice, unless you want to get the debug mode, which I do recommend. I don't have it because I'm a fool, but you can go get it. Burial's not that bad for Nero. Focus on that attack, and focus on not getting hit like that. Use your ability to jump cancel as much as you can, and use Devil Trigger to avoid those attacks. Use your taunts, honestly, use your gun a lot. Your goal with Nero is to get him into that stun state when he doesn't have the fire as fast as possible. And the best way to do that is focus pressure. And as long as you as long as you avoid that, which is honestly the hardest attack to avoid, especially if you're already in Devil Trigger, because you can't leave and go back into Devil Trigger as fast as you'd like. There we go. You're gonna take hits from that. This is also annoying, but kind of the rule for these guys is, if you have the timer, you should take your time. I'm just rushing to kind of show what to do and not doing a good job of it, honestly. But once you get him stunned, Buster in the air, Buster again. And you can like throw in attacks in between those. I don't know what his timer is, honestly, so I'm not going to take too much time on it. And sometimes he doesn't turn his shield back on. It doesn't matter because he's dead anyways. So that's the end of Burial. And the first 20 levels of Bloody Palace. I hope this was educational, or if not amusing. After this, I'll see if I can get into 21 to 40 and so on. I think maybe some of these things seem obvious, but a lot of the Bloody Palace is kind of preparing and knowing what you're up against. Things like your Devil Trigger gauge, and for other characters like Concentration for Virgil or Disaster Meter for Dante, there's a lot of kind of preparing where, I mean, every character has a Devil Trigger gauge, so I guess that's the best example. Knowing how much you have for the next few fights, knowing how much you have to reserve, what you can use to heal, what you can use to like spike down certain enemies, is really going to change how you're going to deal with these enemies and how you're going to deal with the follow-up levels. So as long as you keep that in mind and know what's coming up, which is I think the purpose of these kind of videos, I think you'll do fine. So good luck if you're new to the game or getting there and you want to take out the first 20 levels easy peasy. There's what you got. And I'll see you in the next bit.